The data to ink ratio is such a good way to condense the learning and best practices of some of the most key data visualization principles. Now, in a nutshell, the data to ink ratio is the idea that we want to maximize the amount of ink we're using to show data versus the amount of ink we're using to show the visualization. We want to maximize the data to ink ratio in general without sacrificing design too much. So that means most of the ink we're using is going to be used for showing data, and a lesser amount, a minimized amount, is going to be used for showing the visualization in general. I'm going to show you a before and after at the end of this lesson, so you can really see an example of a high data to ink ratio and a low data to ink ratio. But for now, let's jump in and look at an example of a chart from the 1990s, maybe 1980s. It just doesn't look great. Now, back in the day, this looked wonderful. Indeed, I myself was guilty of producing visuals like this. Not necessarily in dashboards, but certainly in user interfaces I was designing at the time. It was very popular to use a background color and apply a texture to it. In this case, it's a kind of a linen type texture that's applied to the back. Now you can see lots of exciting things going on. Drop shadows, bevel, emboss, borders, boldness, all this crazy stuff going on. What we're going to do is we're going to start to reduce the amount of ink that we're using in this visualization. And I'm going to ask you to see if we have any information loss. Do we lose the message from the data? Do we lose any data? And potentially, we might gain something here as we go through this. So firstly, let's remove the background. So let's get rid of that background. You can see, right, there's no information loss just yet. So let's remove the second background. Right, so we got a background directly around the chart there. And we'll see here before and after, we got no information loss yet. It's getting a little bit cleaner. Right at the start, it was just hard to figure out, what am I actually looking at? Now that it's starting to clean up a bit, I notice I'm able to focus a little bit. My attention's not so distracted by the backgrounds and the crazy colors that were going on. I now can see the title. Yeah, there's like lots of attention for my eyes on the bars. They're so colorful. But let's look at the question now. Japanese franchises top the highest grossing media franchises of all time. Cool. Cool fact. And I'm looking through them there. I see Harry Potter. Oh yeah, look. Yeah, okay, cool. That's interesting. Though I'm just seeing a lot going on still. So let's keep removing things. So let's remove the chart border. You can see the border around there. We get rid of that. Now look, no information loss. Right, and we're going to go even a little bit further here and we're going to remove the shadows. Now look at the shadows along the text there, the fonts. Okay, so we're getting rid of those shadows there. Now we're going to start removing the special effects from the bars. Right, so the bars have a bevel and emboss. They also have a shadow on them, so we're going to remove all of those. Really, so we're just left with the border. Now at this point, from here, could you take a guess as to what is the revenue of the, let's say, Anpan Man? What do you think the revenue is for Anpan Man? Have a guess. Now, because when you go here, you might be wondering, does that include the border or does it not include the border? Now, you notice, of course, your eye has to scan down, right? And you're looking and trying to find that number. Cool. Let's keep going. Let's remove those borders. So, like, people don't have to think that. We're just removing that from the equation. Does it include the borders or not? Don't worry about it. There's no border. Let's remove the redundant legends. So you can see on the right, we're getting rid of the legend. Now, why is it redundant? Well, the label's already on the bars, right? So it's completely redundant. It's a waste of space and a waste of ink. So we're increasing the data to ink ratio here by removing this. Now we're going to do something else here. We're going to get rid of some redundant labels. Now look down the bottom, we got rid of gross revenue in USD, and on the left, on the y-axis, we got rid of franchise unique name. It's a terrible label, right? So it does nothing for us. It's in the title, right? Now, because we took away the label on the x-axis, gross revenue in USD, we've put it up in the title. So now you can see Japanese franchises top the highest grossing in billions of US dollars. Media franchises of all time. So now it's embedded in the title. So we don't have to worry about it later on. And because we've done that, we can now simplify the x-axis. Because we know we're talking about billions of US dollars, we don't have to have a dollar sign and a billion on every single number. Again, we're increasing the data to ink ratio, and we've not lost data. Now what we're going to do here is interesting, because we're going to reduce the use of color. But in doing so, we're going to gain something. We're going to gain the ability to draw attention. Now look at this. The visual is very closely aligned to the title. We are drawing the user's attention to Hello Kitty and Pokemon. Okay, they're obviously the two Japanese franchises that are topping this chart, right? But we're not done yet. You can still see that as you look at this, your eyes are still kind of drawn, certainly to the blue, but also to the boldness of the fonts there. So let's reduce that. Okay, so let's make the focus a little bit more, and we'll reduce the boldness of the lines. All right, so all the boldness now we're reducing, making it easier to focus on the blue bars. Now, of course, we can direct label. So we can save ourselves the eye scans up and down to figure out what's the actual number here, and the kind of the guesswork. When you were guessing on Anpan Man, what did you guess? It might have taken you a few seconds. Whereas if we just did this and direct labeled, there's no guessing involved. We can just look at it directly. It's there right away. So that's great. It's very easy to do that. Now, because we've direct labeled, we can remove the x-axis. And indeed, get rid of the lines altogether. Now look at this before and after. Where we started was something that was pretty rough with a very low data to ink ratio. And what we have on the right is something with a high data to ink ratio. You can see the minimal use of ink to represent the same information. And even more so, we can use this to draw the user's attention now that we've minimized the distractions. And you're going to see this in the case study, how we're going to really focus on removing as much distraction as possible so that later on we can use color to direct people's attention to where we want them to look.